Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Osteoporosis Canada's Cooking Demo Virtual Cooking Class. My name is Tracy Napoli, Director of Fund Development and Marcom at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your cook-along host. Thank you to Chicken Farmers of Canada and Canola Eat Well for their partnership in making this cooking demo possible. We are also live streaming this webinar on the Osteoporosis Canada Facebook page. So a big welcome to everyone watching on Facebook Live. During the cooking demo, if you would like to ask a question, you can do so by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. For those watching on Facebook, you can enter your question in the comments section. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It is not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice. If you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. Nutrition plays an important role in overall bone health and in preventing and managing osteoporosis. When meal planning make dishes that contain bone-building nutrients like calcium and protein, and be sure to take a vitamin D supplement daily. In people who have healthy bones, adequate calcium intake on a daily basis is necessary to maintain bone health. You can get calcium in foods like milk, cheese, yogurt, legumes, nuts, and vegetables like kale and broccoli. Vitamin D helps to increase the absorption of calcium, ultimately building stronger bones. Fats and oils in moderation, like canola oil, aid in the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. Protein is also essential to bone health and is necessary to build and repair bone tissue. Sources of protein include chicken, beef, pork, legumes, nuts, and milk products. Osteoporosis Canada recommends including protein daily in your diet to benefit muscle and bone health. For overall health, Canada's Food Guide recommends including protein foods at every meal. Chicken is a complete protein and has many essential nutrients packed into each serving, including vitamins B6, B12, niacin, iron, and magnesium. For more information, visit osteoporosis.ca. Let's get cooking. Today's featured recipe is one-pot chicken and squash stroganoff with 150 milligrams of calcium and 34 grams of protein per serving. You can find today's featured recipe and other recipes by visiting osteoporosis.ca/recipes. It's now my pleasure to welcome Emily Richards, a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and cookbook author who also enjoys culinary instruction for home cooks who want to learn more and have fun in the kitchen. She is the author and co-author of 9 cookbooks, which include topics from Italian cuisine, weeknight dinners, glycemic index diets, and comfort foods. Emily writes and develops recipes for cookbooks, print and online publications, and websites that include everyday cooking and healthy eating. Please welcome Emily.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's cooking with me and Canadian chicken. We are making a wonderful dish. It's one pot, which is always one of my favorites because that just means less dishes, right? What's great about this is that we're getting a big bang for our buck. We have lots of protein coming from the chicken, and we have beautiful, wonderful addition of calcium in it, which not only offers us a little bit of creaminess because we're using milk, but it just also helps build the dish overall in a wonderful sauce. So we're going to get started, and we're actually going to start off with our chicken. We're using whole chicken today, and what's fabulous about using whole chicken is that it is a wonderful way to save a little money on your grocery bill. It's actually wonderful to have in the freezer to pull out to make so many dishes. And I'm going to show you how to cut the whole chicken. We're going to use the whole chicken and in this dish, but it's a great way to know how to cut up the chicken because you may have family members that just love dark meat or just like white meat, but it's a great way to split it up and use it in different dishes. So I'm using about a 3-pound chicken and it is all ready to go on my cutting board. And I'm going to cut it into about 6 pieces. you can actually cut it into more pieces if you want for the dish. And I'll show you how to do that as we go along. But basically what I want to start off with is a nice solid cutting board that's not going to move around on me, and my chef's knife, okay? And I wanted to make sure that my chef's knife is nice and sharp to cut through nice and easily. It really is frustrating when you can't cut through anything, whether it's vegetables or protein. Now, I've already got all my other ingredients ready, which I know, hopefully, fingers crossed, that I have all the ingredients that I need for the recipe. It's just a great way to be ready to cook through a recipe. So I have all my vegetables chopped, everything's measured out, and we should be able to move through the recipe quite easily. It's something that I always recommend you do when you're cooking in the kitchen, just to make your life a little bit easier. So the first thing we want to start off with is cutting the chicken legs off first. And we are going to cut them off as whole legs. So I will be moving the cutting board around just so that I'm right-handed. So oftentimes it's a little bit easier for me to work obviously on one side than the other. So I'm going to start off on the left side of the chicken, and you can see this is where the leg is and it meets the breast. I'm just going to cut the skin to expose the leg. Now, the great part about cutting your own chicken is that you can actually remove a little bit of excess skin as you're going along. So I'm just cutting along the backbone here to find the joint of the thigh. Okay, so I'm just going to show it to you a little bit there. And I just popped it, and then my knife is going to cut right through to the thigh, and I'm going to get that one whole leg out. Okay, so when we refer to chicken legs, it is actually the drumstick as well as the thigh. Okay, now if you wanted to, you could actually cut this into two pieces, and that's just finding the joint right in the middle and cutting through. I'm going to leave it as a nice piece just like this. So this is our first piece, and I'm going to just add it to my bowl here, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, so my hand might be a little bit in the way here, but I'm just going to do the same thing and cut along to find that joint, just like so. Okay, and then I'm just going to find the joint and then take my knife, try to get my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing, and go along and cut that whole leg right off. Okay, now if this chicken had a little bit of extra skin, I would just trim it off, but this is perfect for how we are going to be cooking it. And we are leaving the skin on because it's going to add a wonderful texture to the dish. All right, so now we have still quite a bit of chicken, and what I'm going to do is lift it up and just kind of balance it on the wings, and I'm going to remove the backbone. So I'm just going to slide my knife, and you'll actually see inside the backbone there. Okay, and just come along like that and cut the backbone right out. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, what am I going to do with that backbone? This is actually a perfect opportunity for you to make chicken stock. Okay, so I'm just going to remove that and set it aside. So if you wanted to, let's say you found some chicken on sale, whole chicken, and you could actually cut it up as we're doing today, and then save all the backbones so that you're going to pop them in the freezer, and they make a beautiful chicken stock. Okay, so it'll just offer up a really wonderful flavor. And there is still a little bit of meat on there. So as it's simmering away, it'll fall off and you'll have a beautiful stock to use for soups or in any dishes. Like today, we're using some chicken stock. All right, so now I'm going to cut off our wings. So the wings are just at the top here of the breast. And I'm just going to put my knife in, and you'll see that there's another joint, and I'm just going to cut it right off. Okay, so there's our wings. Now, if you wanted to, you could, again, remove the wing tip, but I'm going to leave it on. Wings are actually my favorite part, and it is considered dark meat as well. In our family, we love dark meat, and so oftentimes wings and legs are fought over in our house. So that's going to go to our bowl, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Just kind of lift the wing up a little bit, and you'll expose the joint. And I have a little bit of breast meat on there. That's quite all right because that'll be absolutely delicious. And there's our second wing that's just going to go into the bowl. And then we end up with our chicken breast, okay? And what we're gonna do is simply cut this in half. Now, if you wanted to, the easiest thing to do is just to slide your knife in the middle to find that breastbone, okay? Which I can feel it right here. And then I'm just going to let my knife do the work. So this is where having a nice sharp knife really, really helps. And what you'll hit is the bone there. And then I'm just going to cut along there and remove the breast, okay? Just like that. So then I have our nice chicken breast ready to go. Now, again, this can be various sizes depending on the weight of the chicken. So in our case, I'm gonna leave it whole, so I have a nice whole chicken breast. But if you were wanting smaller pieces, you could simply just cut this in half, okay? Just on the diagonal, just like that. Okay, and I'm gonna do the other side as well. So again, I'm just gonna come down that breastbone. And then I have another little bit of meat and bone to add to my chicken stock. Now, we're using some other vegetables in this dish today. So the onion tops, for example, could be frozen with your chicken, your backbone and your bones, and used in that chicken stock. So you have a really nice flavorful stock. I'm just gonna trim off a little bit of the skin there and I'm gonna add it. And then we have another chicken breast ready to go. So in total, you should have about 6 pieces. Or if you're cutting the breast and the legs in half, you'll have a few extra pieces. So this is the opportunity for you to bring everything and put it in the refrigerator or freezer. So by everything, I mean that backbone that you have, pop it into a freezer bag, and that's gonna go into the freezer. And this is your opportunity to head to the sink and wash your hands, because we all know how important it is to have clean hands in the kitchen. So we are going to be, well, you're going to be seeing me go to the sink a few times because we are definitely cooking for real. So I'm heading to the sink to give my hands a rinse, and I'm just going to dry them. And we're going to continue on with our chicken, okay? So I'm just going to set my cutting board aside. I don't think I need my knife anymore, but here is our chicken all cut up into pieces. Now you notice it didn't take very long. It's really just practice. And I'm not perfect at cutting up chicken, but I love practicing because I know the benefits of it. I've saved a little bit of money, which is always great. And sometimes you might not find the piece of chicken in the grocery store that you're looking for. So why not practice and pick up a whole chicken? And then you can use the dark meat is wonderful if you want to put it in the oven to roast or grill. And then if you have a family that is just a dark meat lover, you can still keep the chicken breast, and what you can use them for is to cut them up. They make great cutlets for a quick dinner. They're wonderful in stir fries. Or for the small ones in the family, why not make your own chicken fingers? They're fabulous, cut up into strips, just tossed with some breadcrumbs or my favorite, cornflakes, and then put them in the oven to roast. So they have lots of versatility, and that's one of the reasons why we love using chicken. So we're going to add some flavor to this chicken. It is very tender, okay? So we don't need to, and we definitely don't want to overcook it, but we do want to add some flavor to it. And we're going to do it a couple of ways. We're going to brown the chicken, but we're also going to add some seasoning to it. We're also going to add some all-purpose flour to it because we want the flour to create a wonderful crust on the outside of the chicken when we brown it, but we also want it to help thicken the sauce that we're cooking the chicken in. So what I have here is just some all-purpose flour that I'm going to add to the chicken. And then we're using some dried thyme. I love this recipe because it does use a lot of pantry staples that I have at home. So I don't have to go digging or looking too high and low for things. So it's always wonderful when you can create a wonderful, flavorful dish with a lot of ingredients that you have at home. So this is dried thyme that I'm adding. If by chance you had fresh thyme, it would be beautiful to use fresh thyme in here as well. And then some salt and pepper. Okay, so there is our first level of seasoning. And we're going to toss the chicken all together with this flour mixture. So we want to make sure that all the pieces are coated nicely, okay? And if you look in my bowl and you think, well, Emily, that's way too much flour. It is, but we need that flour for the sauce. So don't get rid of it, okay? And it is in the recipe. It will remind you to reserve that flour mixture. So in the meantime, I'm going to heat up my oil. So today we're using canola oil in our dish, and it offers up perfect use for us in this dish because we need something to brown the chicken, and canola oil is perfect for that higher temperature that we're going to use to brown the chicken. And not only that, it's a neutral oil. So the flavor of the chicken will come through as well as all of the other ingredients that we're using. And it is always in my kitchen. It's a pantry staple. So I'm going to use a couple of tablespoons. We're going to be using oil in two parts of the recipe. We need some to brown the chicken, then we also need some for the vegetables. So it is divided. So we need a couple tablespoons in our saucepan now, and then I'm going to add a little bit more to the pan. Oftentimes I see people browning their chicken and there's so much oil. You don't need too much oil. A couple tablespoons is great. And I'm using a large, wide saucepan. It has higher sides because we are adding more to it. This is referred to as a Dutch oven. The reason being is because we're going to be putting a lid on it. So if you have a nice heavy pot that has a lid, you have a Dutch oven. So you don't have to worry about, well, unless of course you want to add it to your holiday list or your birthday list, you definitely can. Now, what's most important is that we have this oil hot enough, but not smoking, so that it will pick up the nice color that we want on the chicken. Okay, we want that caramelization and browning to happen because that's really what's going to benefit the flavor in the dish, as well as give us that nice crisp skin. Now, in the end, that skin will soften a bit, but it will still create that wonderful layer in the dish. Okay, so I usually just kind of hold my hand over. I'm using about a medium-high heat. If you have non-stick cookware, medium-high is where you should be. This is a stainless steel pot, so I could go up too high if I need to, okay? And then I'm going to make sure that I coat these pieces really, really well. And I will remind you, if anyone has any questions today, please feel free to type it up in the chat box. And if it's about the recipe or about chicken, please feel free to ask. And if I don't have the answer, I know where I can find the answer. So I'm using a large, wide saucepan because I would like to fit all the pieces of chicken in. If that's not possible in the saucepan that you're using, just do it in batches. We don't want to overfill the pan because we don't want the chicken to be steaming. We really do want to create that nice brown color on it. And that's the great part about cooking, is that you can visually see what's happening. So to create that color, it will be turning brown. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure that I have my pieces coated on both sides, and I'm going to tuck them in. Now, browning is something that a lot of people just want to rush. Try not to rush it. It really does benefit the dish. It helps build flavor. And not only that, it produces wonderful bits on the pan that will add to the dish as well. So I'm putting my chicken pieces skin side down, and that's going to help kind of seal and cook, render off any fat in the chicken from the skin. But as you saw, I didn't really have to trim anything away from the pieces. It was quite lean and easy to work with. And then my wings are going to go in. Now, sometimes these awkward little pieces might not brown as good as you want, but that's okay. They're still building flavor. Any little bit of the pieces of chicken that hit the pan and brown up do add lots of flavor. All right, so I'm going to get that leg in there, and I should have room for this little chicken wing in here too. There we go. All right. So I am going to let this sit here and be patient. And while that's happening, we're going to get a few other things together. So here is my residual flour mixture that had the salt, pepper, and thyme in here. Okay. So what we're going to do is, I'm not going to dirty yet another bowl. I'm actually going to add the ingredients to this mixture and get it ready for when we need to add our liquid ingredients. So we are going to use some chicken broth. So remember that stock that we talked about that you're going to make with your backbone, your chicken backbone. And don't forget, even if you're roasting chicken and you've cut off all the meat and you have that beautiful leftover bit, that makes a great stock too. So you could actually add that to some water, and with onions and carrots and celery, it makes a wonderful roasted stock. So the flavor is a little bit different still delicious. So I'm going to add my chicken stock in, or my chicken broth. And if you're not making your own, because if you make your own, you can add as much or as little salt as you want. So you can keep your sodium in check, for example. If you're purchasing chicken stock to have on hand, you can use a reduced sodium variety if you want, so, or a no salt added, okay? So that is an option for you. You can start to see all the herbs kind of floating up from the flour. Then I'm also gonna add some milk. So here's where we get a big bang for our buck for calcium. Milk is fabulous to use. And what's great about it is that it's gonna provide a nice creaminess to the dish. Stroganoff to me, he kind of screams comfort food, homey, creamy. And one of the reasons why is that because it does have that dairy component to it, which is quite lovely. Now I'm using whole milk, and what that does is it helps kind of lessen the split look of the sauce. If you wanted to use a lower fat milk, you definitely could. The chances of the sauce splitting are a little bit higher, but that flour is actually in there to help protect us, okay? So that it doesn't look like it's going to be split. But trust me, in this case, even if it splits a little bit, it's still gonna be delicious. I'm gonna add our tomato paste. So this is something that might be a little bit different for those of you that have made stroganoff for years and have not seen tomato paste in it. I actually add a little bit because it adds a nice little bit of flavor, intensity, and a little bit of color. So it gives us a little bit of a different hue to a traditional stroganoff, okay? So I'm just going to give this a whisk, and then I'm gonna add some tomato paste. So this isn't very much, it's just a couple tablespoons, but you can see how instantly it changes the color, okay? And I often will add tomato paste to dishes because of its intense flavor. Kind of speeds things up. And the great thing about this dish is that even though it's kind of stew-like, it doesn't take hours to make. Oftentimes we think, oh, if we're cooking a whole chicken, it's gonna take so long. This dish doesn't take long at all. So I'm going to just turn over my chicken here. Remember that it's on there browning. And I have some great color on my chicken I'm happy with. You can definitely tell that it's brown. There we are, and sizzling. I don't want it to smoke too much because I don't have my fan on, so things could get a little loud. Let's hope for the best. All right, so that's all whisked up and ready to go. Okay, so I'll just set this aside. And then I have just a little baking sheet here that I'm going to put the chicken on, okay? So because we're only browning it, but again, it's only one pot, I don't have another pot going. I just want to be able to take the chicken out because it will go back in. So whether you're using a plate, a small baking sheet, whatever you have will work really, really well, okay? So I'm not browning the underside, the second side as much, also because it is a little bit hotter now, the pot is. So it won't take as long to brown that second side, okay? So I'm just going to take it out and then you'll stop hearing the sizzle. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit now because we're going to be adding all our vegetables in. We do need a little bit more oil. So I'm going to put the brown chicken here for you to take a look at. So what ends up happening is that we have this really nice golden brown color on the chicken. Some spots get a little bit darker, but that's okay. We just really want to create that crust. So if you actually give it a little poke, you won't be able to hear it, but it does have that nice little tapping because everything's kind of sealed in there. So we've sealed the flavor and the color in there. So now I'm going to add a couple more tablespoons of canola oil because I'm adding all my vegetables in, okay? So just a couple tablespoons. There's not a lot of, again, we didn't get a lot of fat rendering from the chicken because of that browning and the flour in there. So I'm going to add my mushrooms and my onions. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about these mushrooms because they are just plain button mushrooms. But if you happen to have brown button mushrooms, also known as creminis, a sauté selection of mushrooms, so that would be a chef selection that's typically got shiitakes and creminis, sometimes oyster mushrooms. You can really create this dish to be whatever you want. So you can just change it up a little bit. And that's what I love about cooking at home, because you can take something, just give it a little change, a little switch up. All right, onions. This is just a big cooking onion. That's all you need. And the reason why it's a large onion is because we really want to build flavor and have the vegetables in our sauce. So not only is this sauce going to be flavorful because of the vegetables that we're using and the wonderful milk and broth and herbs that we're adding to it, but it's also going to have more flavor because we're cooking the chicken right in the sauce. Okay, I'm just going to grab a spatula so I can stir everything up. Now, the reason why I'm starting with my onions and mushrooms is because they have a lot of water in them. We want to cook out the water. And at this point, you're also going to add some salt and pepper. Okay, so just a little bit of leftover salt and pepper that we didn't use on the chicken, we're now adding to our vegetables, because again, we're layering all those flavors. And if you wanted to, you could add an extra pinch of thyme to this as well. But that thyme is in our liquid that we will be adding, okay? So at this point, we know that the chicken is not cooked, but it's browned very well. So it started the cooking process. So oftentimes when you see a chicken recipe, it might say anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes and beyond. It really depends on the chicken pieces that you're using. So we're using bone-in chicken pieces. So we want to make sure that it all cooks. Now, because we've cut it in similar sized pieces, the thickness is all about the same as well. It will only take about 15 to 20 minutes to cook. Now, that might be shocking for some of you to hear that, but it actually does. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And it's because it's going to be nestled into that sauce and completely coated and essentially almost poached. So you get a really, really nice, tender, juicy chicken. All right, so I'm just stirring this up. Now, as I said, because the onions and mushrooms have lots of water in them, it does take a little bit of time to cook the water out. So what you're looking for is that liquid, that water just to be evaporated, and that the onions and mushrooms can pick up just a little bit of color. It really does benefit the flavor. And at the same time, I'm kind of, all those little brown bits from the chicken that are in the bottom of the pan that I was telling you about that are so delicious, I'm actually using that liquid from the onions and mushrooms to my advantage and scraping everything up to add flavor. So if you wanted to, you could add a splash of wine at this point too. Why not? It's Thursday, right? You could use a splash of white wine if you wanted to. And that would help deglaze the pan. If you find that there's not enough liquid in your mushrooms, perhaps they're a little bit older and they don't have as much water in them, you could always do that just for an added bonus, okay? All right. While I'm stirring my mushrooms, Tracy, do we have any questions at all?
Hi, Emily. Yes, we do have a couple. So the first question, which we can take now, is if someone does not want to cook the chicken with the skin on, can you still make this dish without, by removing the skin?
That's a great question. And I know that's the question that comes up a lot, especially when people don't necessarily want to eat the chicken skin. You can totally take the chicken skin off. I do want you to be a little bit more cautious when you're browning, because oftentimes when we think of browning, the chicken skin actually helps kind of create that barrier to flip. And if you notice on the one side of the chicken breast, when I was cutting it, we have the skin. On the other side, we don't. So that's a great example of how it's easily turned without the skin as well. But I just want you to be patient. Oftentimes, you know, I did let that chicken sit for a while to brown and pick up the color. So often without the skin, you just have to be patient and let it create that crust, and the flour will help. And then you can turn it over and do the other side. And that, again, I can't stress it enough. It really does benefit the overall dish in the texture and the flavor of the chicken. So when you think of stews, oftentimes you're browning the protein first before you return it back to the pot. That's exactly what we're doing, just with larger cuts. So definitely, and let me know how it goes if you're making the dish without the skin. I always like to use a little bit of paper towel to help remove the skin, just to give me a little bit more security, because sometimes your hands get a little bit slippery. So have some paper towel nearby and have at it. It'll be fun. All right, so my pan is getting a little bit dry. The mushrooms are picking up a little bit of color. I'm going to bring the pan over to the other camera so I can show you what I'm talking about and try not to have the steam there. But I have, so you can see the pan is a little bit dry. I have some nice brown bits, again, created from the mushrooms and the onions. They're nice and soft. So at this point, add that. I'm going to add my squash. Surprise! Not a traditional stroganoff recipe, right? Still one pot though, packed with veggies. So this has some squash in it. I thought, why not? We're in the season of squash. I love using squash, and we're getting another vegetable in here. So it also adds some lovely color to it. This is butternut squash I'm using today, so it also adds a nice little bit of sweetness. But you could use any type of squash. Acorn squash, if you want, you could just chop it, and you can actually leave the skin on because as it cooks, the skin will soften as well. A delicata squash would do the same as well. Now, if you wanted to, if you still have some pumpkins kicking around, you could use pumpkin here and chop it up. It would be fabulous. Or what about a sweet potato? All these vegetables would work in here. And what it does, it just kind of gives you an added bump of fiber. It also gives you some great flavor and texture in the overall dish. So I just want to stir that up. And then I'm going to add, remember all our liquid ingredients that we whisked up with the flour? That's going to go in. There we are. And then we want to bring this to a simmer. Okay, so I'm going to give that a stir. Now, Tracy, you said we had a couple questions. Do you have another question for me?
I do. And, just some people are, may not be able to get out and get the fresh ingredients. They may have the chicken in the freezer that they're able to use, and they may have some squash and whatnot. But if they didn't have fresh milk, could you use powdered milk?
That's a great question. And definitely you could use powdered milk here. And I would have that ready to go and whisk it up. So rehydrate it. And you can rehydrate it as per the packages that you purchase it in, and then use the 1 cup of milk. And then that is something that would be easy to add. And if you wanted to, in this case, you could actually increase the amount of milk powder to it, not only to bump up your calcium a little bit, but it also will help thicken the sauce. So a little inside secret from me to you, it does actually use as it does really work as a thickener in some cases too. So in this dish, you'd have 2 reasons to add that milk powder, which is fabulous. And thank you for bringing up having frozen products, because this dish definitely works with frozen. Oftentimes, you have a chicken in the freezer. I always recommend that you thaw before cutting, or if you have it already cut, it will take a little less time. Do thaw your chicken in the refrigerator. It does typically take anywhere from 10 to 15 hours for the chicken to thaw. So keep that in mind if you're planning ahead. And then you can work through the recipe. But certainly you could use frozen squash. You could also use frozen onions and frozen mushrooms. I know a lot of people chop and freeze, and I think that's great, especially if you're finding things at discounted prices, or you're just kind of stocking up and keeping things in your freezer for later. This would be a great dish. Now, you will have to reduce the cooking time a little bit because if you let it cook for the length of time, you might find the squash gets a little on the soft side, okay? So maybe start checking it at the 15-minute mark as opposed to the 20-minute mark. All right, so very quickly, this comes to a simmer because everything is nice and hot. So at this point, I'm going to, and I love using this word because I think it truly is what we're doing, is nestling the chicken into the sauce, okay? So I'm going to just tuck my chicken pieces into the sauce. So this is another benefit of having this nice large saucepan, because everything fits in a single layer. There we go. And I'll bring it over to the camera to show you my nestled chicken pieces. And what does nestling actually mean? So this is what it looks like. So I haven't completely submerged the chicken into the sauce. I just kind of took each piece and literally nestled it in, just like so, okay? And then I'm actually gonna do a little switch. I'm going to cover this and let it cook back here for about 20 minutes. I'll start checking it at about 15. And I'm going to bring this big pot. I don't have two of the same pot, so I had to use my other big pot here. That was simmering. Now I just want to bring it back because at this point, this is where the chicken should be cooked. Okay. I guess maybe I should show it to you first. How does that sound? I'll bring it down here. Okay, so again, I've nestled the chicken in the sauce. You can see the color of the sauce has that nice little bit of rosé look to it because of the tomato paste. Okay, and this is where we want to check the doneness of the chicken. So if you don't have, I'm going to just pop this back up here because that will give me the opportunity to talk about my thermometer. It's an instant read thermometer. You can pick them up at the grocery store, the hardware store, a cookware shop. You can order them online. There's lots of different varieties. I like using the digital thermometer because it is, for now, it hasn't failed me. But if you are purchasing less expensive thermometers, you may find that they have a shorter lifespan, that's all. But that's okay, because as long as you have them in the kitchen, you'll know that you'll be cooking the right way. So this one is just an instant read digital thermometer, and I'm going to insert it into the center of the chicken pieces. So when I say center for the breast, that is kind of the thickest part, but near the leg and on those leg pieces, if you go to the center, you might hit bone, and that's going to give you an inaccurate reading. And what we're looking for is 165, okay? So I would go to the thickest part, and I'll show you that in a second. I just want to make sure that the chicken is on its way to being done, which I think it is. We're just a little bit below 165. Okay, so I'm just going to give that a little stir. But we still have a couple other things that we have to look for too. We have to make sure our squash is cooked. So you can do that just with a little paring knife and insert it so that it comes out easily. It's nice and tender. And we also have to get our sour cream mixture together. And it's not really a mixture. It's a little bit, it's just sour cream. But the mixture that we're creating is by taking some of the broth in the sauce, so our sauce, and tempering it with our sour cream so that when we add it back into the sauce, there's a less chance of having that split look to the sauce that we talked about, okay? So we want to, and I always have my ingredients at room temperature, which typically makes it easier to combine them back together. So I have my whisk here. I just have a little ladle because I want to take some of the sauce out. I'm also kind of basting the chicken a little bit. Okay, so I'm taking some of that sauce and I'm going to whisk it in, okay, just to help bring it together. And I'm using a full fat sour cream because it does reduce the chance of the sauce having that split look. But there we are. All right. So you can see it's nice and smooth. It becomes a little bit more liquidy. And I'm going to keep this whisk to just kind of whisk it in the pot here. So this will create a little extra creaminess, but it will also deepen the flavor of the sauce because it gives it a nice little bit of a tang, which is quite tasty. I think I picked my smallest whisk I had to get in there. All right, I'm going to just move this around. And then I'm going to check the temperature. So once you add the sour cream, it only takes about 5 minutes to heat through. That's all really that you need to finish off the dish, because at the point before you add the sour cream, the chicken is cooked, okay? Now I was hoping to give you the exact reading so that you could see it on, oh, there we go. It's a little bit higher now because I waited, but I'll bring it over so you can also see the sauce. There we are. So this here that I'm going to go into is the chicken leg. So I'm just going to go into the side there. Okay. Into that thicker part. I swear when I took it out, it said it was 170. So I knew I was, that's always the case when you're trying to do this in real life. Let's see how that one is. Yeah. All right. So I know you can't really see what it looks like. So I'm going to actually serve some up so you can see what it looks like. I'm going to put this back up here. And I cooked up some egg noodles because I really like the sauce and I love egg noodles. So I thought it's a great combination together. And it's typical of in a stroganoff that you would have maybe some egg noodles. Also really good with mashed potatoes. I know we already have squash in there, but I'm a carb lover. What can I say? So here are some noodles. And what I like to do with my noodles is after I cook them, just toss them with a little bit of canola oil so that they stay nice and loose and ready for the chicken topping. Okay. So I'm going to take out, I think I'm going to serve up this leg because if I'm having it for lunch, I know that I would like some dark meat. And it's coated with the sauce. So there's our chicken leg. And then I'm going to take out some of the sauce and just spoon it all around so that you get to see the mushrooms as well as our squash. And of course, I have to wipe the plate because I don't want to see the big mess I made. There we go. There's our chicken. I just put it in that camera for a minute because we're going to add a little bit of parsley to it as well. I know sometimes parsley gets overdone, but it just adds a nice little bit of freshness to it. And I'm just going to casually tear some right on top, just like that. Okay, that's a lot of parsley, but it'll be nice and fresh. You could also just chop some of the parsley and stir it right into the sauce if you wanted to, which would be really nice as well. Okay, just like that. And now I just need some people here to eat with me for lunch. Tracy, what are you doing for lunch? Do you need some chicken?
Oh, I would love some. I would love to come over. We're going to have to do that after. In a few months, hopefully, we'll be able to have lunch together. But
that
Emily,
would be
that
wonderful.
looks amazing. I know. And you know what? We do have a couple of similar questions, and we can just get to these. So if somebody wanted to make this dish and they didn't have, let's say, a whole chicken, but they just had purchased either chicken breasts or chicken legs and wanted to make it for one person, how could they do that?
So for one person, I would actually, you could easily half the sauce ingredients, and that brings you down to about a cup of liquid, which gives you enough sauciness for 1 to 2 meals. Now, the bonus being here is that if you wanted to make the full amount, you could freeze it. And I just wouldn't put the sour cream in it. And I would, when I go to reheat it, whisk in the sour cream. So if you're making this for a smaller household, just brown the chicken pieces that you're going to use. And this recipe calls for 1 package of mushrooms, which is 8 ounces. So you could easily use half, and you could use 2 smaller pieces for 1 serving. So if you wanted to use the whole leg and just cut it in half, that could be your serving, or you could do both legs and then freeze 1 for later. So there is some value of not only saving some money by using the whole chicken and cutting it up yourself, but you could also save some time and make the whole dish and freeze it. So oftentimes when you take a look at a recipe, and in this case, this recipe has amounts that are quite easily divisible by half. So it is something that you can reduce by half for a smaller household. And if you wanted to, if you didn't want to cut your own chicken into pieces, you could definitely pick up your favorite chicken pieces. I know during the pandemic, going to the grocery store was a little bit frustrating for some people because they weren't always finding what they were looking for. So they were going in and they really wanted chicken breasts and they couldn't find them. Same with chicken legs. But there was always seemed to be a whole chicken. So now I think we're a little bit more at ease in some cases. So you could definitely look for chicken legs, those whole legs, or even just thighs if that's all you're looking for. And you can do this with boneless, skinless chicken thighs if you wanted to as well, if you wanted to kind of alleviate all the bones in the dish. Now, bones do add some flavor to it, but I will let you know that if you are using any boneless pieces, so whether they're breasts or thighs, do reduce the cooking time, okay? You should start checking it at about 10 minutes because you're still going through the same process of browning the chicken pieces, starting that cooking process, and then as it simmers in that lovely sauce, it's completely encased and it's covered. So start checking it at about the 10-minute mark. So hopefully that helps.
That is great. Now, another quick question. If somebody wanted to add frozen peas into this dish, at what point should they add them?
That is a great addition. We should put that in the recipe, Tracy. A cup of peas at least. And especially if you don't like parsley, it will give you the green. I would actually stir in, if you're using frozen peas, they only need about 5 minutes in something that's this hot. So I would stir it in right when you add the sour cream and just heat it through so that they plump up and heat through as a pea. You could also use a mixed vegetable here too if you wanted, if you had the pea, bean, and corn mix or the carrot mix. As long as it's small, those vegetables will heat through quite easily and they won't add very much liquid to it. Oftentimes when we use bigger frozen vegetables, there's a lot of liquid from them being frozen that gets added to the sauce and waters down the sauce. But in the case of frozen peas, you definitely don't have to worry about that. And it's another great way to use up a pantry staple from your freezer.
Super. And I know, so we're getting a question about yogurt and sour cream and if you can interchange them. So this recipe has the calcium calculated by using the sour cream and milk. However, if you have plain yogurt on hand, I think Emily would agree, don't use like vanilla or any flavored kind of yogurt. That wouldn't be delicious, but you should really read the product labels to find out how much calcium and protein, because yogurt has protein in it as well, that you would get from this. But in terms of as an ingredient, could you switch the yogurt for the sour cream?
In a lot of cases, I would say 100% go right ahead without even stating how much milk fat, the percentage of milk fat in the yogurt is. In this case, much like I said about the sour cream, we're using a full fat sour cream. I would use a higher fat yogurt, a full fat yogurt, because you will get the benefit of the richness of the dish. And also that chance of splitting is a little bit less. And I know in the end, I know when I put food on the table, my kids are not worried about whether the sauce is split or not. So oftentimes it's all on me and what I think, but it just looks, it looks beautiful. And you'll get that beautiful mouthfeel of a full fat product. It's not very much and you're dividing it up amongst everyone as well. So whether you use a full fat sour cream or a full fat yogurt, you'll get the benefit of both of the texture of the dish for sure.
Great. I'm just going back. Somebody has a question regarding the freezing of the dish and how you would incorporate the sour cream after. So if you're going to incorporate the sour cream once you've reheated the dish, do you still need to add a bit of the warm broth to the sour cream before adding it?
Yes, definitely. So you'll be reheating the dish and you can do it if you're reheating it in the microwave or in the saucepan. Just take out a little bit of that liquid, the cooking liquid, the sauce, and whisk it into the sour cream and then stir it back in. And then, for example, in a saucepan, you would do exactly as we did here today, but in the microwave, you would just pop it back in the microwave. It's not going to take that much longer, but just so that it warms up the dish a little bit. Now, if you're in a rush, of course, you could always just stir in the sour cream and eat it. It'll be absolutely delicious. It'll just bring the temperature down a little bit. That's all.
Okay, great. And we have time for just one more question. If someone doesn't have a meat thermometer, can you help advise how they can tell how the chicken is done?
Yes. So in recipes, you will see usually 2 degrees of doneness. So one is when you're cooking protein, it's that internal temperature of a thermometer. Another one is you'll see words like no longer pink inside or juices run clear. So in a sauce dish like this, sometimes it could be a little bit tricky, But the best thing to do is just take a piece out and on the plate, and I'll actually show you just with a fork and knife. I'll grab one here. So in the case of dark meat, I always like to say when juices run clear, because that is around the bones typically. So you would cut into it and then you take a peek, and if the juices are coming out and they still have a hint of pink to them, just let it cook a little bit longer. In the case of chicken breast, you can cut into it and the chicken breast should be no longer pink inside. Okay. With dark meat, the dark meat tends to have that little bit of a darker pinky color to it. So that's why you want to get closer to the bone to see if the juices are running clear. And that's a great way, without using a thermometer, to note that your chicken is cooked, but not overcooked, because we want that lovely juiciness of the chicken. Now that I've cut into it, I want to eat this, Tracy. I won't though.
You should just have a quick bite and just tell us all how delicious it is.
Oh, all right. You don't have to twist my arm. I definitely will do that. And as it sits, it just picks up a little bit more of the sauce. The sauce kind of gets a little bit thicker. That means I won't be able to talk, Tracy, when I have my mouth full of food, just FYI.
Okay, well then you know what? As you taste that and tell, oh, that does look good.
It's really good.
It is really good. Okay, and I think we're all gonna have to try and make it. And please let us know how it does turn out. We are going to have to wrap it up for today. So Emily, thank you so much for yet another wonderful cooking demonstration. We've had a few this month, and we have another one coming up in a couple of weeks. So please please register on our website at osteoporosis.ca so that you can also get information about our next cooking demonstration. You can also visit the website for tools and resources to help you manage your bone health. You can use the Calculate Your Calcium tool. You can find other recipes, including today's recipes. You can also take the Know Your Risk quiz, and you can view the recorded version of this webinar on the OC Replay webpage, which will be available in the next 48 hours. And of course, thank you again to our partners, Chicken Farmers of Canada and Canola Eat Well, for their partnership, and to our presenter, Emily Richards. We want to thank you, our attendees, and to everyone who watched us on Facebook Live. Be sure to stay connected by following Osteoporosis Canada on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.